Hello and welcome again to another episode of Sacktown Talks. Today we have a special guest for y'all. We got Joe Patterson joining us today, the Patter Dude. Patter Dude family joining us today to talk a little bit about local government and housing. Joe, how's it going? Welcome to the program.
Great, thanks. Thanks for having me. I had to come live because otherwise one of my 4 kids would bounce in the show for sure.
Definitely.
Yeah.
We've had a lot of technical difficulties this year, so it's awesome to have a in-person guest again. And I guess for the viewers who don't know, who don't follow you on Twitter, first of all, shame on you. It's a great follow out there. But can you kind of give people some background on you and kind of how you came to be here in the Sacramento area and kind of working in politics?
Yeah, sure. Well, from Napa, born and raised, and went to Sac State, proud Hornet. And after graduating Sac State, got into the Assembly Fellowship program. So I worked in the Capitol for a few years and then left and ran the Lincoln Club in Northern California. And then after that, came back and just, bought our house in Rocklin and just decided to get involved in the community, basically.
Right. I remember when you first were going to run for Napa City Council, kind of what propelled you there was kind of like a local zoning thing for like a hospital or something like that. Can you kind of give the listeners at home kind of a sense of kind of what propelled you, knowing about politics, working in it? Why would you ever want to run for it?
Yeah, no, it was just great. So, when I moved to Rocklin, I only lived in Rocklin for 3 years, and there was a proposal. I live in sort of a master plan community, and I know this is going to definitely make me seem, anti-mental health, right. But there was a proposal right across the street from this high school in my neighborhood to put in a, really a lockdown mental hospital with 107 beds, inpatient and outpatient and stuff like that. And we didn't really know what it was, but the company that was putting it in was just really dishonest, even with our own town, in terms of, what it was going to be. And so, my wife and I got involved. We both have political backgrounds, put together a little coalition, and it was pretty much a done deal. It ended up, not going forward. They ended up withdrawing. And then we, I decided to run for city council that day because I did a public records request on the city and just found all sorts of really bad things you don't want to see from your city. And nothing illegal or anything like that, just things you don't really want to see from a policy standpoint or transparency standpoint. And so I said, hey, look, I'm going to run for office and try to clear this up. And so I did, and ran against 3 incumbents. There were 3 spots open. We still have open districts. There were 3 spots open, 3 incumbents, and I was a top vote getter, which was kind of surprising to me. But that's my political background. I don't think they've ever really had somebody with a political background like that, run for office.
So I guess, before that, have you ever run for student council or anything else like that?
In high school, I was on, ran for student body government, but never ran for elective office. Helped out a lot of campaigns, but it was a lot of fun for me. I just wanted to, at that time, when you're going through a campaign, you just want to win. Right. That was a competitive nature. I just wanted to win and show, because I sort of felt like the establishment from Rocklin was against me at that time. So in everything that would happen that would show that would just drive me more and more and more. So, I worked on this thing like 12 hours a day for months, fundraising and all those things. And I had no institutional support. So it was asking my friends for $100, here and there and stuff like that. So
how was that, I guess, fundraising, asking people, for $100 here or there? I know that's like a big impediment to a lot of people who just like don't want to do that, don't want to put the call time in. How much of your time running for kind of local government was spent kind of doing that?
I would say that was probably 50%, 75% was just asking for money from people. But you just have to, I work with candidates right now, on the day job. I say, you just got to ask every single person. It's like selling life insurance, you know? Just give me $100. I know you, give me $100, and so I sort of set out a budget at that time of 30 grand. So my goal is I'm going to ask 300 people for $100, and some people give more, obviously. And so that kind of helps out. But I had to hit my fundraising goal. I was just ruthless. I could ask anybody for $100, so.
So have your sales ability picked up, your fundraising ability? You have a higher hit score now that you've been doing this for a while?
Well, from the Lincoln Club when I was it was all fundraising. Right. Everything we did was asking people for money to help causes or, moderate Republican causes. So it really wasn't an issue asking for, it was pretty easy asking for money. It didn't bother me at all.
Just kind of being in this business, every time, you get asked for money and you have to ask clients for money, I always feel like a kid asking my dad for money. and whether to say yes or no. Now, as a father of 4, like, are you ready for that? Payback when these kids start asking you for money, Joe?
Asking me now? I mean, all 4 of them are going to after-school program. They're already asking me for money. They're already on the Patterson family dole.
I couldn't believe it. Yesterday, my 5-year-old was telling me about how they have a snack bar at school and they have money for the snack bar, and I was like, "What? That's going on right now?"
So you have to give your kid money. So that's crazy.
Yeah.
You know what? I've. This sounds insane, but in just preschool, preschool is crazy.
Mm-hmm.
Cost. We go to a normal preschool, nothing fancy about it, just because my wife and I both work. Through 5 years of that with 4 kids, $250,000.
What?
$250,000.
Wow.
It's crazy. I mean, but what else are you going to do? I mean, you got to pay for childcare if you're both working,
right.
So it makes me think a lot about, my mom is a waitress, she was a single mom of 2.
Mm-hmm.
Like, how did she pay for childcare?
Right.
It's crazy. People just figure out ways to make it work in a lot of ways, but it's just crazy how much childcare is these days.
Yeah. And some people would say, crazy for having 4 kids.
I'm crazy for having 4. 3 was, we're supposed to, not have any more after
right.
3, things happen. And,
is it noticeable, the extra work? They say, after 3, it just kind of,
She's only 3 months old, so I can't really judge.
Yeah.
I mean, our house is crazy. There's a cartoon called Loud House,
mm-hmm.
and it's a kid's show,
right.
like a Nickelodeon show. And that is my house. There's constant yelling, fighting, screaming. I've given up on just sort of putting away toys and stuff because it's just destroyed. So
that's funny.
Yeah.
So you've been on the council for what, 6 years now? Is this your 7th?
This is my 5th year. I was just reelected in November. Yeah.
Okay.
So
kind of a big part, especially in Rocklin, one of the growing suburbs of Sacramento, and something we've talked a lot about here in the state. One of the big issues is housing. And questions of why don't we have enough, do we need to build more, and kind of where you are is an area where they are growing, they are adding housing. So kind of wanted to have you on, talk housing as a local government official who looks at it, knows the issues and approves it. Just wanted to have you on, kind of talk what are some of the obstacles we're seeing out there in building homes, and why aren't we building more. So I see on Twitter all the time you're always tweeting about low cost housing or low income housing. Can you kind of tell us about kind of your experience in Rocklin right now and how it is, kind of how much it costs, and what are the kind of the hurdles to go through to just build something out there right now?
Yeah, just from a city perspective and sort of what I hear from developers, but unlike a lot of cities in California, or I don't even know if it's really a lot, but Rocklin, since I've been on the council, has approved every single project that's come before us. Now, I have voted against a couple of them, but we've approved them collectively as a city, and every single project, every single one of them has built-in opposition from residents, even if it's zoned appropriately. We're one of the most controversial project in town since I've been on the council was a 200-unit apartment complex on a plot of land zoned for 200 apartment units.
Right.
The developer asked for no variances. And we had people at the city council meeting, very upset about this proposal, So just there's sort of 2 things. There's, I think, dealing with the community component of it. And then there's the actual sort of bureaucratic approval process, and then also there's the developer side. But the community, my goal has been, let's be as transparent as we can on what's happening. Now that exposes, I think, a little bit of additional risk for the developer, but you got to create some level of trust for residents. So we have, we expanded, for example, our notification radius. Most cities, the state law is 300 feet. You have to notify residents. We did 600 feet plus a minimum number of parcels. So we make sure, because again, during the psychiatric hospital I was referring to earlier, not a single homeowner was notified of the proposed project.
Wow.
And so, that really bothered me. So my first goal was, hey, let's create a level of trust with the residents that we're at least making sure that they know what's going on in their neighborhoods. But the second part is sort of getting through the approval process, It's a very long process. We could be here all day, talking about that. But before it even reaches the council, we have a project that's going to come forward to us someday, It's 4 years. It's been taking 4 years to get to the council. And as a policymaker, which is what I am as a city council member, once the project comes, I'm sort of the judge and the jury at that point. But before it comes is how do you expedite that process in a way? I've been saying, hey, bring the project to us. I mean, we're ready to make a decision at some point, on the general concepts or something, but it, for one reason or another, it has taken 4 years to get to us.
And kind of what kind of project is this?
Oh yeah. Sorry, I didn't really go into that. There's a new project in a town, again, it's owned by Sierra College actually. And it's been zoned for housing for 10 years. And there are, maybe 1,000 or more units. Most of them are multifamily units, and 200 of them are affordable units, senior affordable units. So these are subsidized. It's a subsidized project, right? And it's just taken for one reason or another. Staff and the developer were concerned. There were concerns over, well, you want to put a park there, but that's not part of the city's master plan to put in a park, and well, we're building 1,000 homes. Don't you think we should have a park, So just these back and forths. And then once a project is approved by the council, it could still be a year of plan check and all these things that go into actually issuing the building permits. And that happened with the controversial project that I was discussing earlier. It took 1 year for them to actually get their building permits. And once they got their building permits, they just broke ground the other day. This was approved years ago. They just broke ground maybe a couple months ago. And the price of lumber is up 400% in the last year, So, but then there's also Rocklin, and I think a lot of cities are like this too. We don't control most of our impact fees. Only about 20% of the impact fees go to the city for parks and roads and things like that. But the sewer connection fee, I'll give you an example. In the city of Rocklin, the sewer connection fee is $12,000 per unit. It could be a 500 square foot apartment, or it could be a 10,000 square foot mansion. It doesn't matter. It's $12,000. Now that agency has accumulated $57 million into this fund to pay off a wastewater infrastructure thing, but that's 22 years worth of payments that they could make with just their existing money. They could probably make the payments just investing that $57 million and just using interest. But instead, we have these insane fees. So you talk to a developer will say, hey, this represents 8% of my total budget is just hooking up toilets, and so it makes the project almost unworkable in Rocklin. So I try to use my role too to sort of pressure that, because if the council's decided as a policy, we want to have this project there, why are we having all these other hangups? And so a lot of the state is focused on, hey, let's get cities to zone for projects. Let's get the city to, it's not all the cities. There's special districts. There are, cooperating agencies and school districts. And all these interested parties that the city can't control, but they have their own thing that they have to deal with that impacts the availability of housing. And I'm not aware of that being addressed whatsoever. It's all on the cities. And it's kind of bothersome to me because we've approved, 2,000 units or something since I've been on the council. And 1,000 of them, I was trying to count for preparation of this, have been approved and not built. And they may never be built.
Shovel ready, I guess, projects that are just...
Yeah, they might not have their building permits, but they've been, from a policymaker standpoint, they've been approved and we're good with it. And for whatever reason, it could be financing, it could be this, the sewer connection fees, it could be anything. But at the end of the day, the city has approved it and it's still not getting off the ground.
Wow. So, when Governor Newsom took office a couple of years ago, one of his number one priorities was building more housing. He's talked about the housing crisis, homelessness. And, he had this goal of building millions of homes a year. And, we've fallen way short of that. So can you just kind of run us through the process of, let's say I'm a landowner in Rocklin. I just bought 100 acres in Rocklin. Like, how would I go about, getting that ready, to zone and build homes? And I guess how long would that take? Like, what's your first step?
Well, your first step is meeting with staff and sort of doing this pre-application meeting where you give them, as much information as you have at that time, which could be architectural drawings, but by that point you're already 6 figures into the project, you know. But you can have this meeting before you really spend a lot of money and just sort of figure out what's going on. Is the zoning right? What kind of zoning changes do you need? And one thing that a lot of people don't realize is right now, because of the new housing elements that all these cities are doing through everywhere in the state, a lot of people are changing the minimum zonings of areas from maybe, let's say, 20 units an acre to 22 units an acre to accommodate the requirements that they're getting from the state. But that requires a rezone.
Wow.
So that means that, and the city will process those rezones, but that builds in opposition to the project before it even happens, you know, before there's even a project there. But once you have that pre-application meeting, then you go out, you hire all these consultants and arborists to, you know, check the trees, to do the EIR, depending if it needs an EIR, or at least some kind of environmental document. All these studies, sound studies, you know, greenhouse gas studies. I mean, and by the time you've actually brought a project ready to sort of be submitted to just staff, you're 6 figures in. And then staff, there's going to be months of back and forth with staff on all sorts of things that we probably don't have time to talk about. But I mean, I can give you some examples later. But then after that back and forth, and they sort of come to some kind of agreement, then only then it goes to the planning commission, and then depending on the zoning, to the city council. So you're talking about, you know, a 1-year process if you're lucky.
With staff, just kind of ironing it out.
Yeah, exactly, before it ever gets to the council. I mean, yeah, you're talking about a 1-year process. Like I said, the one project's been on Sierra College 4 years, you know? I mean, it's a big project though, and it's a lot of rezones and things like that, a lot of variances. So, but still 4 years is kind of a long time.
Yeah, like I remember, because I grew up in Elk Grove right before the big housing boom, and I remember, you know, you'd get 4 houses to an acre, or maybe 6. Now you're seeing 20 some units per acre.
Those are for apartments, really. Right. Actually, in most cities right now, we have a 22 plus is sort of our minimum for multifamily. But now you're really seeing cities go for 30. I think we've sort of agreed to 26 units, but that came from the development community. This is what pencils out in Rocklin, is 26 units an acre. We can't do 30 units an acre. You know, and once you start getting over 30, you're talking about steel. And then that just changes everything. Well, in a city like Rocklin, the rents don't meet the threshold to actually do, you know, 4 or 5 story projects, you know, so you're sort of limited to 3-story projects. I mean, there are a lot of issues about developing in a city, a suburb, that really don't apply to Sacramento. So you see sort of these policies coming out that are designed for Sacramento and around transit and all those sorts of things. It is nothing for a suburban town, you know. So I mean, you know, as far as I think the governor has a good goal, but the cities we don't deliver housing product. I've outlined a lot of issues that need to be streamlined, and I would be more than happy to help anybody streamline a lot of those a lot of those things. But why is there you know, there's no focus, I don't think, on actually getting the people who are putting in the capital to build the projects. That I think is a major thing for the suburbs, not so much, you know, a city where you're going to have people move in and pay high rents, you know.
Right.
So,
and I guess maybe that's a kind of an interesting part where we're at a market now is, you know, 10 years ago, Rocklin was this booming kind of single family home area to go to, and they're building thousands of single family homes. Kind of, I guess, what's the state of, I guess, the single family market, new builders out there? You know, I looked out there, you know, 2011, and there was like 6-7 builders out there building new homes. Kind of what's it look like now?
There's still that going on. There's still one master plan community, the one that I live in, that's sort of being wrapped up in the next 3 years or so. And then, but then we're entirely, there's our other cities or other jurisdictions entirely around our city limits. So unlike maybe Roseville, I mean, Roseville can annex part of the county forever and ever and ever. I mean, they could just, Lincoln, for example, currently 45,000. Their
Right.
plan is to grow to 120,000.
Wow.
You know, because they're just going to keep sort of growing. Well, we can't do that. So in order for us to meet our housing element in the future, we're going to have to build up. We're going to be the only, it's almost like all the Bay Area cities are sort of together, but they also have they're all the same. They have a
Right.
bunch of demand like that, right? But we're going to be the only city where we're telling developers, well, actually you have to go up or you have to do infill. And so it's not really going to make us a competitive market, I think, for the housing in the future. In fact, there's one town next to us, which I won't mention. It's a very small one. If you actually go to their website right now, it says they incorporated to stop the growth from Rocklin. They turned down a development, a master plan that would have given their city millions of dollars, would have given the school millions of dollars. So the city or the town approved it, and then the voters did, a referendum to throw it out, which is fine. Voters can do that. Well, now because of SB, or I don't remember what bill it was, but if you propose a project that meets the zoning standards, the city cannot legally turn it down. So a new property owner came in and is proposing basically the same project, but none of the money going to all,
Wow.
because they don't have to. There's no legal requirement that they need to do that anymore. So now that town's going to miss out on all that. But they are hugely anti-development, right? And they've actually litigated against Rocklin for housing projects and the residents or whatever, And that's their right. That's why we have this. But the fact that their website still says that they incorporated to stop development from Rocklin bothers me, because we're taking very seriously, trying to meet our housing obligations, and neighboring jurisdictions aren't. And this happens all over the state. I mean, there's Marin,
Right.
Santa Monica. You can name a lot of other cities that aren't sort of chipping in like they should be.
Yeah. We were hearing right now about the real estate market, people moving from the Bay Area out to Sacramento, potentially Rocklin. 10 years ago, you could get a really nice home in Rocklin for like $500,000. Kind of what does a new home in Rocklin look like these days? How much is it costing? And kind of, you talk to the developers too, like how much money are they making on kind of percentage wise on these homes, and in comparison to 10 years ago or so?
Yeah, I think right now the single family developers in Rocklin aren't hurting. Especially if they're buying, home builders buying property already in a master plan community. I'm just gonna guess that they're doing all right, doing that. When I bought my house 8 years ago in Rocklin, 9 years ago, 495, 3,100 square foot house, big backyard.
Right.
Now it's going to be an 11-year-old house, and it's worth $775 now. But if you got my house and put it in a brand new, in our development, brand new, you're talking $1 million.
Wow.
So that's crazy. We've never, maybe we did in 06, 07,
Right.
whatever. But I couldn't buy a house in this market. You see 2,400 square foot houses selling for, $900,000. It's crazy, and so, but I can't, you can't stop the, home builders from charging what the market allows them to build, but there's risks to that too, right? I've seen some housing builders try to sort of, you have to get on the waiting list and run your credit checks, and then and then the market sort of softens, right? And they can't sell those lots anymore. So,
Right.
But I don't see that happening in Rocklin right now. But the second a house goes in the ground, it's sold, maybe even before. It's.
And do you get a sense of, I guess how's the population of Rocklin growing? Kind of, I guess you guys have early census returns and.
Yeah, we, I think some of these numbers, but I think it was from finance, came out a little bit ago, and Rocklin for a few years, just recently, was the fastest growing, was the first, then the second, then the third fastest growing city for towns over 30,000 people. Now we're, still one of the faster growing cities, but there's only so much inventory, and the prices are so high because of the, partly because of the school district.
Right.
So that number's, but we still were one of the faster growing cities, top 10%, I think. So I don't see that slowing down in the near term, but we're, like I said, if the house is for sale, it's gonna go.
It's going quick.
Yeah.
You were talking earlier about kind of high density apartment complexes, building that. I've seen you on your Twitter feed. You talk about the cost per unit of one of these low income housing units, and what are they, like $500,000 or more?
Okay, yeah, that's something. Okay, so what a lot of cities do, if a developer doesn't want to put in affordable units or whatever, they'll charge a fee. Rocklin doesn't have one of those, but a neighboring city recently put up it was like 60 units or something, and it was over $500,000 a unit for affordable housing. And these are, 500 or 600 square foot apartments.
Right.
My thing is like, why doesn't the city just go out there and buy, 50, 60 houses and give them to, maybe bigger families, right? Or, something like that. Still at a subsidized rent rate. But what happens is that it's just the truth. The second the government gets involved, it is more expensive. Private developer isn't going to build at $500,000 or $600,000 a unit. Sacramento is redoing one of their for affordable, or maybe it's homeless housing, but one of the former hotels downtown here, I think off K Street, it was like $625,000 a unit for 300 square feet or something. I mean, that if we're going to address affordable housing, if the government's going to get involved, they got to bring down that cost somehow. I don't know what it means, but that's not affordable. Buy them a house, So
yeah, then the housing prices would really go up. Wow.
Well, that's true. I mean, yeah, you got to think about that, but I don't know what the solution is. I mean, maybe it's just giving grants to the private market or something, but you got all sorts of stakeholders with roles in sort of those decisions. And so, they all have their objectives that they want to see. I mean, I think Cal Matters just had a piece today on labor's involvement in all the housing packages this year. That's obviously an important stakeholder, right? But and I think what the article was talking about is that actually the ticket to getting housing done is getting the laborers or sheet metal people, getting them involved in getting some of these things pushed through. And so while it might be more expensive getting a unit delivered, you might actually get the unit delivered. So I don't know what the secret sauce is. I really don't. But you can't pay $625,000 or $500,000 or $400,000 for a 500 square foot apartment and expect that it's ever going to happen.
Right.
So
that's crazy. Something you touched upon earlier was kind of getting a project approved and kind of public input, and you hear about this kind of NIMBYism, not in my backyard. We're seeing it here in Sacramento, like they've approved kind of infill or duplexes to be built in single family areas. And, people are up in arms and kind of, I remember this kind of growing up in rural areas, and there's kind of a sense of when you live there, you want it to stay rural. You don't want to deal with traffic. It seems like more people is always bad. You just want it how it is. Can you kind of talk about how kind of you guys are addressing kind of NIMBYism and, how does it affect, new projects getting approved?
I think it's, I care what the Rocklin residents say, right? But I mean, I think just being honest with the stakeholders when you're having one-on-one meetings, and I'm at the point now where I'll say these things at council meetings too, but I remember meeting with one of the individuals who wants this Sierra College project. And by the way, I haven't made a decision. I haven't seen the project. I don't know what's going to come before me, But she was talking about how she didn't want, single family homes built in this open space, next to her property. Well, it's not open space. That's zoned for housing. It's been zoned for housing for 50 years before your house was even built. And so I said, why is it okay to cut down an oak tree, because that's often brought up, an oak tree for your house, but not a future residence? Somebody's going to live there someday if it's built. And she honestly said, I appreciate her honesty. She said, it's got to stop sometime. I mean, and it's not and I get if you sort of move to a suburban area, you move there because you want it to be quiet and you want it to be peaceful. You don't want to see cars speeding down your street. You want to be safe, all those things. But there are property rights for the people who own the other property, you know? And so my thing is I always try to meet with them, hear their concerns. Are there actually, you can't really influence the project before it ever comes to you, but because it's really not you're going to be the judge of that project, right? So I'll meet with the developers, I'll meet with residents, I'll give everybody my 2 cents. But if there's something they say that, you know, you can sort of influence, like for example, hey, we want a sound wall here. You know, if this is going to be built here, we got to have a sound wall. Okay, you know, let me just talk to staff about that, tell them that's something that come up, and then they'll figure it out, you know. But I don't know if you can really address people who are opposed to development in their neighborhoods or whatever. You can't, I mean, you want to hear them, listen to them, and take their concerns seriously when it comes to public safety and roads and where you can, but you got to give the property owner, it's like an American value, right. You know? I mean, property rights, it's not crazy. We zoned that property to build a, you know, high density project. It's been like that. Mm-hmm. We can't take that away just because you don't want any more neighbors,
right?
You know,
and you bought that property, you
knew it,
research that,
you know. But it is really, really important. I go back to that trust factor. You have to make sure the residents know what's going on in their community. I mean, we put the second we get an application, well, once staff deems it complete, we get an application from a developer, we put it on our website, and you can sign up for email notifications so you can find out what's happening in your neck of the woods probably a year before it ever even happens. And so you can start engaging with the developer. Every developer I know will meet personally with a resident and will address their individual issues. Yeah. I mean, we recently approved a project where somebody was concerned about their tree that is not on their property, but on the developer's property is going to cover their, you know, they're not going to have shade in 109-degree weather or whatever. So the developer put one in for them. You know, I mean, it's if you meet with if you have concerns, right, they can be addressed, you know. But
Good to know.
Yeah, seriously, it is worth. They don't want to. They realize that they're gonna have to sell the houses, and they don't want to make people mad. I mean, we've had also some developers, and actually, this was a project I voted no on. It was a rezone. You know, these are 10,000 square foot lots, and wanted a rezone for like 30 houses. 3,000 square foot houses on 3,000 square foot lots. So they're basically kind of going up. Right. And it's like, look, if we're going to rezone it, I mean, for that kind of density in that kind of area, why for, you know, these little homes like that? Doesn't really, I'd rather do something different than that, you know. But anyways, the developer came in right off the bat and started telling people, you know, these properties are, you know, they've owned them in their family for 100 years, or hey, your fence is encroaching on my property, you got to pay me $10,000. And so it started a major battle. Eventually what happened is the developer gave them all the property, you know, just said, okay, you're encroaching, you're good, here we go, we'll build around this. You know, they worked out the agreement, but it started off really rocky for a while there, you know. And you know, the developer was right, you know, they were encroaching on the property, but the neighbors were not happy with that project. It was a rezone, you know, and it, I voted no on it early in my career because I just felt like it, you know, rezone for other single family, you know, these small lot houses in the middle of mass, it just didn't really
fit. Yeah.
And it's not, I mean, a lot of people say that, like, hey, you know, this apartment complex doesn't fit here or something like that. But I mean, I feel like if you're going to rezone for something that's going to make everybody mad, you might as well actually meet the housing demand, right? Not another 30, you know. We also sold off parkland in Rocklin. This is another project I voted against. Sold off parkland in Rocklin to build 16, sorry, it was 1 acre, 16 high-end condos. I'm sorry, I don't support selling parkland for 16 high-end condos. That doesn't meet anybody's housing needs at all, you know? Yeah. I mean, people will buy them, right? I mean, they're breaking ground right now, you know, they're going up. They'll probably sold already, but that doesn't meet any housing needs. And I don't even think it was really a product we needed to sell the house.
Right.
You know? So.
Well, I guess that's kind of like the interesting is when I think of Rocklin, I think of single family homes. People move there because they want a yard, totally. They want a space. So kind of what is the demand for a condo or an apartment down there versus kind of maybe somewhere, you know, down in Sacramento?
Well, the vacancy rates are really low in Rocklin, but that doesn't mean that, sort of the rents meet the cost of whatever it costs to put in there, But I mean, most of the apartments being put in now are pretty nice. I mean, higher end, I wouldn't mind living there, and they go really quick, and I think, we have a demand for more affordable housing. I mean, you see it in every community, right? People saying, when I say affordable, there's two types of affordable. There's market rate affordable, something people could, who make whatever sum of money can pay for. And then you have the actual affordable, which is subsidized. I mean, there's huge demand for that. And I think apartments, we do have, our population is aging in certain portions of town, but they don't want to leave their grandkids or whatever. So yeah, they want to live in a condo or an apartment or something like that, and I think there are a lot of other options that the state has done to help. Accessory dwelling units is going to be, I think, a big one in Rocklin, and you'll see really pick up. But, California Department of HCD, basically, we wanted to put in 5% of our housing stock to be ADUs. And my thing was, hey, we'll incentive. We've had no success doing ADUs, none. And I said, let's put in 5%. We're just 5% of our 3,000 units will be ADUs, granny flats, whatever. And I said, let's incentivize them like crazy and incentivize certain types. So people aren't doing garage conversions, that they're actually building into their backyard. You incentivize what you want, right? And so I said, I'm real serious about this. And the council was on board. We submitted our plan to the state. The state rejected it, said it was too many, 5%, because we've had no track record of success.
Really?
Well, the law just passed a couple of years ago, and we're saying we will create a program to make this happen. And they rejected it. And so we had a very long meeting over this, and we basically agreed, okay, we'll reduce it, but we're not going with the number that the state gave us. We're going to go higher than that. And it's like 3%. I mean, it's such a small number of units over, the next 10 years or something. And
so if you live in Rocklin,
yeah,
you can apply to build an ADU, and the city will pay you or help subsidize the cost of that unit?
Well, I mean, we hadn't created the program yet. I mean,
that's the
so
concept,
there was nothing, but not necessarily pay you, but maybe we waive all your,
fees.
Not only the connection fees, but inspection fees, because you still have to do, make sure the electrical is safe, right? I mean, you still have to send a guy out there or gal out there to look at it and say, hey, let's just waive all that stuff. I mean, we don't, the guy to go out there for an hour to look at all this stuff. Let's just cover that and make sure it happens, But so we never really had those conversations because the state rejected us.
So would that, earlier you talked about this $12,000 sewer hookup fee. Would that apply if you're adding an ADU?
See, there are some good things the state's doing. And there was legislation that said if you're hooking up an ADU, A, the cities can't stop it, and B, the special districts or the connection fees or whatever can't charge those either. So no, it would not apply.
Okay, awesome. So some things you've touched on is you don't know what the secret sauce is to, make more housing or make it affordable. I guess, but what are some of the things that the state, I guess, should work on or look at to, I guess, speed up the process and I guess just make it a little easier?
I think they have to look at suburban models. Well, first of all, they have to stop exempting cities. And I know that's very limited out there, but I feel like Rocklin's getting rejected on because we want to do a couple hundred ADUs, right? Where Marin doesn't have to do anything, gets an extension. And in other cities, coastal cities, for example, But I think one thing we really have to look at, and I'm sorry, this is probably going to offend all my environmental friends, but we really got to get serious about the environmental document for housing. I mean, if we can exempt it for stadiums and we can exempt CEQA for all, what about housing? I mean, if something's zoned for housing, or not even not zoned for housing. Well, let's say we're doing a rezones right now on the entire city because we're doing our housing element. They're rezoning all these properties. We have to do an EIR. Why? We're trying to meet this is a multi-million-dollar process for the city, by the way. Taxpayer dollars taken away from police and fire to meet their obligations. So I think they have to rethink the environmental document. I mean, yeah, you don't want the, home builders or future tenants, going to the bathroom and then it just goes into some ditch somewhere. Yeah, you want to make sure it all still works out, you know, but that is one thing that I think the state really has to look at. But every little thing that the state adds on, whether it's solar requirements or now the new move is electrical, you know, making homes all electric. And I'm sorry, we live in PG&E territory, you know. I don't want to put everything all electric, but if a developer wants to, it's something, you know, the future homeowners will look at, right? But I don't want to require that. But anyways, all these things add costs to the projects, and so we have to think about that. I think even when you're thinking about building homes next to transit and making them administrative approvals, I think it's Senator Wiener's bills. He, you know, I think there's a great concept, but then there's also added costs into those bills that make it almost unfeasible for a place like Rocklin, you know? So I know, again, in the article today, he says he really wants to look at that, but I think developer fees, impact fees is something that, you know, is an easy target to look at cities to do. But I don't know if that's, you know, if you take away the park fee, for example, in Rocklin, again, we only take 20%.
Right.
I mean, do the residents, do they want that? I mean, they don't want parks in their neighborhood. That's fine, you know, but so we can waive those. That's not a problem. But I think that we have to just find ways to make it easier for the cities to actually process these things. I mean, what if there was sort of a state clearinghouse or something, right? Where let's say there's a zone parcel here. I mean, and then it just becomes more ministerial, you know. Even the actions of the city staff, again, before it even comes to us, there's all these decisions being made. We have no insight into that. But I mean, cities certainly play their role, but I think the state has to look at, you know, really the suburbs. If they want this to blow up, Sacramento's doing all sorts of interesting things. You already mentioned the multifamily or the duplexes or fourplexes, I think is what it's up to in every single family zone. I mean, that works for here or for Sacramento. Probably won't work for a lot of other places. I mean, honestly, a lot of cities aren't going to go for that. Right. But what are what will the suburbs go for? You know, reach out to the suburbs. Not all about the cities. You know, a lot of people from San Francisco. My neighborhood is all people moving from the Bay Area right now.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask you. You know, is this true that like a bunch of people are just moving from the Bay Area over here?
It's crazy. I mean, it is really crazy. I think, you know, I mean, there's a lot more diversity coming to Rocklin now. A lot more different in every way. I mean, income levels, racial, political views. I mean, Rocklin's still a pretty conservative city in the sense, but a lot of new ideas coming to town and things like that, and but from all over mostly the Bay Area. I mean, they're just coming in and buying houses. I mean, you know, over asking price and
like $1 million. What a good deal.
Yeah, I know, exactly. And you know, obviously I think that's a great thing, but you know, it really limits the ability for somebody who just wants to move to Rocklin, you know. So
I understand you just started your own company. What is it called? Provident Strategies. So what's some of the work you're doing there?
You know, it's interesting because I've always been so afraid because of being on a city council member. I don't ever want to get into a conflict where I'm sort of using my position, right, to, you know, government code 1090, you know, conflict of it. Don't ever want to get into that, you know, but I've really enjoyed, obviously, I love local government issues, you know, and I think a lot of the sort of people that I work with, the stakeholders, and, you know, on the hospital, for example, they brought somebody in from Tennessee, some lawyers in from Tennessee to talk with California residents about why we need this hospital in town, you know. So I've worked on a lot of local government. I mean, I maintain databases and just election histories. I know there's some other people that do this too, but you know, using the data, I understand there's a lot of information in data, but I also work with trade associations. Obviously, you know, the card rooms are a big client of mine, and I have some other work that I'm doing, do some campaign work, but I really like advocacy, you know, and obviously worked in the legislature. I love public policy. I mean, it's bottom line. I love it. I'm a nerd, you know, so
Addicted.
So, yeah.
Well, awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us and talking housing. Learned a lot. Very interesting stuff. If some of our listeners want to catch up with you and kind of follow you on social media, I highly recommend it. Can you give out your kind of Twitter handle and how to follow?
Yeah, it's at Patterdude, Patter dude.
And what about your wife's top secret Twitter handle?
Oh,
what is
yeah.
that?
I think it's actually Patter Chick.
Patter Chick.
She doesn't ever tweet, but she did tweet at me the other day. It was really strange. First tweet in like 6 years.
I always look at that. I was like, when is she going to interrupt here? We'll see.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Joe, for taking the time, and love talking with you.
All right. Thank
Thanks.
you.
Some are called dreamers.